friends! Spring is finally here, and today I want to share with you some books, movies, and activity recommendations that will help you feel all those spring vibes. You might want to grab a pen and a piece of paper, and let's get started. I'm going to start with the books, and being a seasonal reader, I must say that spring and summer are my slower reading seasons, so I will not have too many, but those that I will talk about are some really good ones. I have divided them into categories. I have some fantasy slash romantasy spring reads, some classics, and a couple of cozy mysteries. If you're a fan of young adult romantasy, fairy tale like story, not super heavy on the world building, but filled with magic and whimsy, then you are going to love the Once Upon a Broken Heart series by Stephanie Garber. This will take you on an adventure through the enchanting world of the magnificent North, where fairy tales come to life. The series consists of 3 books, and it tells the story of Evangeline Fox, a young girl who has always believed in a happily ever after. But one day she finds out that the love of her life is about to marry someone else. So she's heartbroken and desperate to stop the wedding, and she makes a deal with Jax, the Prince of Hearts. In return, she must give him 3 kisses at the time of his choosing, but after the first kiss, she understands that this deal has a lot more consequences than she expected. One very distinct trait about these books is the writer's ability to transport you into the world that she created. If you look at the covers of these books, this is what you're signing up for. The author has somehow transferred the colors into the story. The way it's written, you can see all of this coming to life. So if you want to take part in the true fairy tale, read these books. And don't be intimidated by the size of them. They just look hefty, but they're really not. The font is quite big, so each of these books reads like an average 300 pages book. Staying in the realm of fantasy, next up I have Stardust by Neil Gaiman. This is an adult fantasy book, and it's a tiny bit heavier on the world building, but it's still quite easy to follow. That being said, from the perspective of a person who has a hard time following more complex world building, it's a fairly short book, so if you don't want to commit to a series, you can pick this one up. It has amazing writing, as all Neil Gaiman stories do. It is a charming journey of self-discovery. Young Tristan Thorne lives in this small village separated by an ancient wall from the land of fairy, and in his attempts to win the love of the girl he likes, he promises to fetch her the star that they both watch fall from the night sky. But to do so, he must cross the wall into the land of fairy, and as these things go, the journey doesn't turn out to be as simple as he thought, and he might also return from this adventure a very different man. This book is pure magic. It feels like stepping into a closet and discovering an entire new world with a magical kingdom where fairies and unicorns and witches and all kind of different creatures exist, and where a fallen star might turn out to be more than just a celestial rock. Moving on, I have 2 classics to recommend, and I know probably most have already read these books, but in case you haven't, I would like to try and convince you because they are so good. And the first one is, of course, Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery. It is the story of an orphan girl who arrives at this old-fashioned farm just to discover that the family that runs the farm wanted to adopt a boy. But before they can send her back, Anne, who has a longing for a real family and a real home, will try to win them over. The writing will transport you into a cozy farm, simple living with nature, trees in bloom, waking up early, doing farm chores, frolicking in the fields, and daydreaming. It is very clear that Anne is very different from other children, and you will feel it immediately when you first get to know her. I think Anne's character is a very beautiful representation of all those kids who were different. So if this resonates with you, go ahead and read this book, you will love it. The next one I have is my favorite book of all time, and I will continue to recommend it probably to everyone for the rest of my life. It is, of course, Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This is all about sisterhood, togetherness, joys and sorrows of life, love, kindness, friendship, and so much more. The amount of tears that I cried reading this book, both happy and sad tears, for some reason it hit so hard into my nostalgia. Though the events of this book are obviously nothing like what I lived, it just made me feel all the feelings. It follows the life of March sisters Meg, Jo, Amy, and Beth as they grow up navigating adolescence into adulthood in the 1800s America. All girls have very different personalities. The sisters grow up guided by their mother and strike up a close friendship with the next door neighbor boy, Laurie. It reads like a lifelong friendship, the way that you get to live life along March girls, how you root for them, how you wonder where they will end up and see their personalities develop as time passes. This is probably the only book I would say don't watch the movie until you read the book, and I'm talking here about the 2019 adaptation as it's the only one I've seen. And I'm saying this because 90% of the joy of this story is the wondering what will happen next, whilst the movie is presented in a dual timeline and it's kind of starting at the end, showing you how they basically got there. So please read this book, it is truly a masterpiece. And to close off the book recommendations, I have two murder mysteries. The first one is Shady Hollow by Juneau. I have just recently finished this book and I loved it so much. It's such a light read. The action takes place in the small village of Shady Hollow where woodland creatures live in harmony until one of them turns out dead. The local reporter Vera Vixen thinks that this death could be a murder, so she decides that she needs to get to the bottom of this and solve the case. I've seen reviews that said this book feels like if Agatha Christie wrote Wind in the Willows, and I completely agree. I'm recommending it for spring mainly because of the world created by the author. I mean, woodland creatures living in a small community, what can be more spring-like? Although it's stated at some point in the book that the action actually takes place in August, unlike any other murder mysteries that I've read, which usually take place in autumn and make a very strong emphasis on describing the season, this one doesn't, and I think that the feelings this book is giving is much more like spring. Also, Shady Hollow is a delightful little community complete with a sawmill and a newspaper and a coffee shop, a splash of cozy into that murder mystery thing. The next book I'm going to recommend has very strong spring vibes, and it is When the Crow's Away by Auralee Wallace. Now, this is a sequel in a series, and the first book is called In the Company of Witches, but I would say it can be read as a standalone, as the author gives short explanations throughout what has happened before. Unlike the previous book, this one has very distinct spring vibes. It has all that scenery description, and also just look at the cover of this book. Do I need to say more? It is set in the small town of Evenfall, where Warren sisters run a cozy bed and breakfast. Bryn Warren has a magical ability to see and talk to ghosts of people who recently passed away, and she helps them to find peace and make the transition from the world of living to the world of dead by passing on messages to their loved ones. But when the ghost of a recently deceased chocolatier shows up and is positive that his death was in fact a murder, Bryn has to help him uncover the case, although she doesn't really share his conviction. Along the way, she has to also figure out what's messing up with her magic and what's that weird feeling that she's getting. This book is actually more than it seems. It deals with loss and grief in a deeper way. There's also plenty of family drama. The murder mystery in this book is very intriguing, and the twist at the end is totally unexpected. I highly recommend it for cozy mystery fans who enjoy a bit of magic and paranormal thrown into the story. And with that, let's move on to the movie recommendations. If you're a fan of cottagecore aesthetic, then you will have to watch the Netflix original series Anne with an E. This is an adaptation of the book that I talked about earlier, Anne of Green Gables. I would say that the series deviates quite a lot from the original storyline, especially in the later episodes, and I would generally say this is a different take on Anne of Green Gables. This version of Anne's story is more modern and more appealing to today's viewers. It also gives a deeper understanding of Anne's past and how it affected her personality. Even though it can be quite dark and heavy at times, it is also full of this wonderful, funny scenes that give you that warm feeling when you're watching it. You will get to watch Anne grow stronger despite her tough childhood and also finding her own family and friends. The show also explores the challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated society in the 1800s. It's beautifully made with amazing cast and stunning visuals. The story begins in springtime, so you will be able to soak in all that beauty of countryside spring scenery, the trees in bloom, shining sun, and of course Anne's unique view on the world makes this series beautiful and inspiring. It will make you want to put on your most beautiful dress and go run through the fields and pick flowers and just enjoy nature. Another motion picture with strong cottagecore vibes is Talk Everlasting. If you like the aesthetic in the beginning scenes of Hocus Pocus, you will love this movie. It also stars Alexis Bledel, the actress who played Rory in Gilmore Girls. Here she plays Winnie, a young girl who longs for a life outside the control of her demurring mother. And one day when she gets lost in the woods near her home, she discovers this magical spring, and the spring makes whoever drinks from it immortal. While lost, she also meets Jesse Tuck and his family, who have drunk from this spring and are immortal because of that. They are kind and generous, and they immediately take her in as one of their own. This movie has a magical element, the music is beautiful, and the scenery has this ethereal quality to it that you don't see enough in movies. It is an adventurous, romantic fantasy drama. The acting is phenomenal, and it's a really heartwarming story that gives you a new perspective on death. And I especially like the ending. I think the ending is really the climax of this movie. The meanings and lessons that are in this movie are easy to relate to, the core messaging being don't be afraid of death, but be afraid of the unlived life. Next, for the most exquisite romantic academia vibes, I would recommend watching Pride and Prejudice, the 2005 adaptation. If you haven't seen this movie yet, trust me, you are missing out. Save this for a rainy spring day. This will help set the perfect vibe. The story revolves around our two main characters, Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy. Lizzie embodies this feminist ideals of her time. She likes to spend her time reading and does not really care about the societal expectations to marry someone she doesn't love. Mr. Darcy, on the other hand, is an arrogant member of England's upper class. Despite his unfriendly demeanor, it's his honor and kindness that make him endearing. He's also a bit awkward, which can make him seem emotionally distant. It's a slow burn enemies to lovers story, with Liz's pride and Darcy's prejudice causing conflict. This is probably one of the most aesthetically pleasing movies I've ever seen in my entire life. The attention to details is incredible. Every scene is so beautifully curated. It is honestly a cinematic masterpiece. So again, if you haven't seen it, go and watch it. It's really worth it. The next movie on my list is Finding Neverland. This is about James Matthew Barrie's inspiration on writing Peter Pan, and it is based on a true story. And I want to just give you a heads up. This is a very heartbreaking movie, but it's also uplifting at the same time. It is magical and beautifully crafted, not only in visuals but in acting too. The cinematography, costumes, locations, and scenery are absolutely stunning. The movie demonstrates how the power of imagination can really change a person. This film makes you think about the endless possibilities of our imaginations and how a friendship could form not just an everlasting bond, but also create art that will continue to inspire generations. It's such a beautiful story. It's definitely worth watching, but brace yourself for some heartbreak. Next, I have two rom-coms, and the first one is called About Time. If you were to choose only one movie to watch from my recommendations, please let it be this one. This is one of the most underrated movies out there. I've never seen anyone talk about this movie, so I'm going to fix that now. The story follows Tim, a 21-year-old guy who hasn't had much luck with romance, and one day he finds out that the men in his family can travel back in time. So he decides to use this power to make each day count. The plot focuses on the importance of cherishing every moment spent with our beloved ones. It's simple yet so profound and wise. It reminds us of moments that we take for granted and how precious they are. I really want everyone to watch this movie. It reminds you to really appreciate life. And just a heads up, don't watch the trailer. I think it just doesn't make this movie justice. And the last movie on my list is called 500 Days of Summer. This is one of the most honest movies ever made. It has a plot that actually happens in real life, and it will make you go back to your heartbroken times. It is a quite sad film, but it's still worth watching. It is about Tom, who works as a designer for cars for special occasions while dreaming of becoming an architect. And one day at the office, he meets Summer, his crush, who later becomes his girlfriend. The movie then opens up each character's personality traits, wishes on relationships, and how they progressed as they were dating. It is about a love that it's not meant to be, and it shows how sometimes, no matter what you do or say, you're not meant to be someone's love of their life. It has nostalgic vibes, and again, it has beautiful cinematography. I feel like I've said this about every single movie today, but it's the truth. So these were my movie recommendations, and now let's move on to activities. One thing that I love to do each season is putting on an ambience room on YouTube while doing house chores. For spring, I usually choose The Shire or some Studio Ghibli ambience, and I will leave the links to my favorite ones in the description box below. As soon as the temperatures start to rise and the sun starts to shine, a very simple thing that you can do is to just open up the windows and let the fresh spring air fill your apartment. You can also wake up early on a weekend and listen to the birds singing while the town is still asleep. This can be a very meditative activity. You can get a hot cup of tea or coffee, put on a blanket as it will still be a bit cold outside, and go onto your front porch or on the balcony, or just sit by an open window and soak in the morning light and the song of birds. This would also be a perfect time to practice some mindfulness and being present in the moment. You can go flower foraging and spend some time outside, find and pick some beautiful flowers, and then come back home and press them in a book. The pressed flowers are so beautiful to use in crafts. You can make a DIY bookmark or a lantern. I've seen so many ideas on Pinterest, and I'm definitely planning to do that myself with some flowers that I will pick this spring. You can also learn how to make a flower crown with the flowers that you pick, and I think this is a cool activity for that time when dandelions are in bloom, because they have this long and flexible stems that are probably more beginner friendly. I found this video that has very easy to understand instructions on how to make a flower crown, so I will also leave the link to it in the description box. Very simple thing you can do that will only take 2 minutes of your time is to change the screensaver on your phone and on your laptop to a beautiful picture of spring. You can go and sit under a tree in bloom or even on a sturdy branch of that same tree and read a book or just listen to music. I would go for classical music and just relax, enjoy the nature waking up again and the scent of flowers. I don't know if it's just my perception or it's indeed so. I feel that cherry blossoms used to last so much longer back in the day. I remember being a child and spending time at my grandparents' house. They lived on this street that was filled with cherry trees, and in spring, when they bloomed, it was just such a magical place. The smell of the flowers that lingered in the air was just incredible, and I remember it used to last so much longer. Now it feels like they just last for a couple of weeks and then they're gone, so go and enjoy those blooms while they're still there. Another thing you can do if you like crafts like I do is to build a bird feeder, and you can go for a classic little bird house, or you can make something a bit different like this ones that I found on Pinterest. I honestly think this is so creative. I would have never thought of using a cup and a plate to make a bird feeder. Another cool spring activity is flying a kite. Spring is usually very windy where I live, and it is the perfect weather to fly a kite. We actually bought one a couple of years ago, but we have never taken it out, so I will be definitely doing that this spring. And the last activity on my list is going to a farm to pet baby animals. This is such a fun experience, especially if you have kids, they will love it. I absolutely adore animals, and whenever we go to a farm, I always feel so charged with positive energy. I had the opportunity last year to see deer herds in the wild, and it was one of the most magical experiences of my life. It was during our trip to Dublin. We took a bike ride in this huge park that they have, and this park is known for having a population of deer, and we didn't think we would actually see any, but we bought a bag of carrots just in case. And after venturing into this park and seeing the first herd, we thought we were just lucky, but as we advanced we saw more and more of them. It was honestly so beautiful. A lot of them like to keep their distance, but some were really familiar with people and they were very friendly. They were probably used to getting treats, and they would just come up to you and sniff your hands. So I got the opportunity to feed them the carrots that we bought, and it was just amazing. I would like to mention though that approaching animals in the wild is never a good idea if you are not okay with the possibility of being attacked or injured. So please be careful and never force an interaction with them. Also inform yourself on their mating seasons, as they get much more aggressive during that time, and never approach a mother with babies. That being said, thank you so much for being here with me watching this long video. I appreciate you a lot, and I will see you in the next one.